everybody to week 9 of Politics, Power and Resistance, where we are studying the topic of gender and power. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Professor Alison Phipps, who's very kindly agreed to do a short interview with us about her work. Alison is Professor of Sociology at Newcastle University. And Alison and I actually go back a long way because we worked together. I started working with Alison in 2006 at the University of Sussex, and she was brilliant then, and she's absolutely brilliant now. So it's a total treat for us to have her with us today. I've invited Arunima Das, who, as you know, is our tutor for the subject, to help me out, because Arunima has used Alison's work a lot in her PhD. And Arunima has just completed her PhD on violence against women in Bangladesh, in Dhaka city, where she's from, and we're eagerly awaiting the outcome of her PhD and soon to congratulate her on becoming a doctor. So I'm going to hand over to Arunima for the first question.
Thank you so much, Alana, for this nice introduction. And thanks a lot, Alison, for joining with us today. So I'd like to ask you the first question we have. What are some of the different ways we can think about gender?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to do this. And Alana, you are just brilliant. I'm a fan of your work from afar now. Now we're not colleagues. I can't believe it's been so many years that we've known each other. And this is a really good question to start with. So what are some of the ways we can think about gender? I actually do a lecture called What is Gender, or Can We Have Several Thoughts at Once? Because we have to have several thoughts at once when we're thinking about gender. And I think some of the weaknesses of some of the gender related politics that we see circulating is that they only kind of have one thought about gender. So I talk about gender as a structural binary, as a spectrum of different identities, and also as a political device. And probably it's more things as well. So when I talk about gender as a binary, I mean it's an economic, social and cultural binary, and it sorts us into one of two groups, men and women. It's constructed through our bodies, it's constructed through the economy, through institutions, through language, through behavior. It's generally thought to follow biological sex, or what we call biological sex, which is also seen as binary, but in practice it's learned, assumed and assigned. And it's often maintained through violence, and I'll talk about that a little bit more probably later. The other thing about a binary is that it means that one pole of the binary is positive and powerful, and the other pole is negative and marginal. So in the gender binary, men are the superior half of the binary, and also the universal and neutral half of the binary. So when we talk about mankind, we really do mean mankind. But of course, gender intersects with other social structures and categories, such as class and race. So we can't just talk about the gender binary. What we have is a sort of a collection of binaries and categories, all co-producing together. Capitalism entrenched the gender binary. So of course, concepts of gender have a much longer history, but what capitalism did was separated production, economic production, from reproduction and social reproduction, and instituted the kind of nuclear family structure that we all know of today. And why did it do that? Because capitalism relies on social reproduction, which is the creation of and care for human life, but it doesn't want to pay the cost of that. So what you see is a sort of bourgeois family unit in which women do the work of social reproduction, unpaid and completely separate from economic production, while men go out to work. And that's the kind of foundation, or one of the foundations, of how capitalism extracts value from human beings. And that model was also exported by colonialism to other parts of the world. So then you get to kind of the ways in which race and gender were co-constructed by colonialism and colonization. And of course, well, you know this very well, and I rely on your work a lot to talk about this, Alana, but notions of race have a longer history, but populations were systematically raced by colonialism. I find Maria Lugones's work really useful on this, about how populations were systematically raced, so they could be murdered, kidnapped, enslaved, etc., but also systematically gendered, in that women were subordinated to men and made responsible for that social reproduction, and attempts were made to eradicate those genders that didn't fit the Western binary. But Lugones says that this colonial modern gender system had a light side and a dark side, in that white bourgeois people had proper gender and biological sex, and colonized and racialized people couldn't measure up. And that was sort of entrenched in the 19th century sciences of sex and race, in which the two categories actually became so closely intertwined. So to be of the superior white race meant also to have proper gender and sex difference. And Kyla Schiller's work is really useful on that as well. So gender is that kind of structural binary that works with class and race to sort us into different categories, basically.
Yeah.